a huge update. Took place late last week and over the weekend with the Pac-12 in the Mountain West. And obviously, we have talked about this story at length in every detail possible. And we were telling you that on the 31st of May, and then all the hyenas came out and said, no, no, no. Well, it's June 1st. Well, it turns out on the 31st of May, all 5 exiting members of the Mountain West gave written notice and sent deposits in, $5,000 each, saying that, hey, a year from now, we are leaving the Mountain West Conference. Now, this was a step that if you've been watching the show at all, you know we have been waiting for and expecting. It is a significant moment in time for both the Pac-12 and the Mountain West, but this is a significantly bigger story, in my opinion, and from people I have spoken to, for the Mountain West. And I say that because now they can get back to the business of building the future for the Mountain West. Because remember, when the members sent in that letter, and for those of you who don't know, the 5 exiting members of the conference, Mountain West going to the Pac-12, they're still on the board of directors, right? Because they had not given notice. They had not, triggered the process of leaving the conference because they hadn't sent a letter. They had not put their $5,000 deposits in. So they were still on the board of directors. Well, why this is so significant is because if you know these 5 members are leaving, and I think we're all well aware that the 5 members, almost without pause or hesitation, were going to leave this conference. Mm-hmm. That was the reality. And you look at these exiting 5 members right here: Boise State, Colorado State, Fresno State, and San Diego State, along with Utah State, all gave notice that they are leaving the conference. Well, now they are no longer on the board of directors. So what that means is the reimagined Mountain West can now get to the business of 26 and beyond. They can get to the business of negotiating that media rights deal out in the public, right? And having open, honest conversations as a business unit, because you, quite frankly, we're not going to do those things and hand your soon-to-be competition, really important information about the way you were doing business, how your deals were going to be constructed. That simply doesn't make business sense. So now you can actually operate as a full functioning business. This is a big moment in time for the Mountain West because, again, remember what's on the line here. Their summer meetings are coming up here in the very near future. So you really needed to get this done by then. It was a fait accompli, in my opinion, and by most people's opinions, that these 5 members were going to do that by this deadline, because you certainly at this point were not going to stay in the conference. So this is going to allow the Mountain West to operate on things like a media rights deal, adding, if they want to add new corporate sponsors, if they want to talk about valuations and all of the stuff that you have to do to be a fully functioning conference. That's all been on hold. As crazy as that sounds, it's been on hold. But now that those notices are in, the Mountain West can get to their business. But one thing that I think everybody is waiting for is what's going on in mediation. Sources close to the situation have told us that the process is continuing. They have not resolved anything. We told you late last week, we were told by sources very familiar with the process that it was going very, very well. However, they had all agreed, all parties involved had agreed not to release even the least of details, to keep it all in-house, in good faith, to try and get the best outcome for everybody involved. And that's exactly what we're seeing, because on this show, I think we've been very candid with you. We have really good connections in both the television industry, at the university level, at the conference levels. Like, we talk to a lot of people, and all of them have told us point blank, hey, it's going well, but we have agreed not to give out details. And they have not. So I think that's exactly what you want to hear. If you're a Pac-12 fan, I don't think this changes your calculus much at all, because this, again, this was just a date on the calendar. We are going to give notice at the last second possible, and that's exactly what these exiting 5 members did. This changes your calculus not even a little bit. You are still focused moving forward. You now, I think, have to get through this mediation process, because remember, The exit fees are significant, and I know a lot of people want to talk about the poaching fees. I think the exit fees are a big part of this as well, because it's $15 million, right? And if you're paying $15 million, that's a lot of bread, and that's $75 million to the Mountain West Conference, unless you somehow, through mediation, negotiate that down, or if you end up in front of a judge, which, again, is not going to happen. I was told on Friday that in no uncertain terms, there is not one single person involved in this process who wants to see either the poaching lawsuit or any of these exit fee lawsuits go in front of a judge. So I, again, will tell you, I don't think that's going to happen. You are going to negotiate this down as much as you can. And then the Pac-12 at that point will be able to get on with, hey, let's add another member. Most people believe that that's going to be a Texas university in one form or another. And let's get on about our business. I think this today is much more impactful for the Mountain West. And I think it's business as usual in the Pac-12. But Jake, this was an important date on the calendar. And I think it allows everybody, I guess the right way I would say it is, I feel like it allows everybody to take a deep breath.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like, a little bit of the pressure's off because now these schools have given notice. But, I have to say, I think if we just ignore the fact that now the financial pressure is officially on, we would, not be doing this topic justice, because the reality is you are responsible for these fees, right? The reality is, you are in mediation. And the reality is now these schools have committed to going to what is supposed to be a conference, what everyone thinks is going to be a conference, but isn't officially a conference. And so I think that that's still a pretty tall task to sort of accomplish. We can sit here and talk about how, yeah, it's great they gave notice, and yeah, it was definitely a date on the calendar, definitely a step in the process. But they waited as long as they could, and then they gave notice. And yes, I think this piece about the Mountain West being able to do business again is great. But the reality is I'm still in this place where I'm wondering, okay, what's the path to this grouping of schools becoming an officially recognized conference, number one? And then number two, how far is the hole that you're going to have to dig to make that happen? Because that's really where I think the rubber meets the road for this whole situation. 12 months from now, when we look back on this and we say, okay, they got X, Y, and Z through mediation. And, then they got this for a media rights deal. It cost them this much. They're getting this much from the media rights deal. Now, how many games do they have to go out and win? Now, how do we get into that profitability part for each of these universities? Because when you listen to school administrators talk, they're always talking about, taking care of the student athlete and making sure that the student athlete's in a good place, and, making sure the institution's in a good place. But the only way that you can do that is if you have enough money to operate. So that's my single biggest concern, is how do you get through all of this? How do you come out the other end in a more positive position than you started? Because I think the moment you decided to poach those schools was the same moment you decided that you were going to have to dig yourself a hole to then dig out of that to get back into a good spot. And I think that's what we have to try to figure out.
Yeah, I think that, listen, let's be brutally honest about what the fortunes of these two conferences are, which is A, I think they are linked together. B, I still maintain the best course moving forward is to merge and have one conference, however many members that winds up being. I still maintain, and I was talking to somebody outside our studio today who was asking me, hey, do you really feel like that these two conferences will just kind of exist instead of thriving? And I absolutely do. I think if these two conferences end up competing with each other, because I don't know how you wouldn't, I think you're going to be taking money from each other, and neither one of them is going to see significant paydays. You are the exact same product. The exact same product. Does the Mountain West, lose a lot of football? Sure it does. Do they lose massive viewership? Not at all. They don't lose significant reach. They don't. Would you love to have Boise State in your conference? You would. But is Colorado State or Fresno State, Utah State is scandal-ridden and frankly has not been relevant in college football for I don't know how long. They are probably fourth in the state of Utah. I would think having Bronco Mendenhall as your head coach would help that. I think not only is he a tremendous football coach, he's a tremendous man, but Utah State is not even on the radar in their own state. You're not you're not a significantly better conference on one side of the line or the other. And that's the real tragedy here. If you would merge and put all of these universities into one athletic pot, you would have a $10 million product. You would. I've been told that by multiple TV executives that $10 million would be a number that would be very feasible based on, hey, if you're putting together a footprint that encompasses the entire West Coast of the United States, there's real value in that. When you're putting together multiple conferences who kind of muddle that up, and you have markets that are insignificant, Fresno State, with all due respect, because I know that Fresno State fan gets very uppity when I say it. Fresno State is not something where you're like, hey, anybody know where the Fresno State game is? Nobody cares. It's the same thing I'll say about San Diego State in football. Nobody cares because they don't win games. They're not relevant.
Right.
Basketball, totally different conversation. I think it's why GCU, Grand Canyon University, and Gonzaga are such important pieces to this puzzle. It's why Gonzaga turned down a bid from or turned down an offer from the Big 12 to join the Pac-12, right? Because they understand where their bread is buttered and where they're going to make their money. And that is not missing the NCAA tournament. The fact of the matter is the Mountain West is an excellent basketball conference. The Pac-12 is going to have to hope that some of the lower tier programs in that conference step up in basketball. It's, depending on who you believe, it's between 15 and 20% of your media puzzle. So it's a lot of money. And I think when you divide this pie the way that these two conferences are what seems like inevitably going to do that, I think you're cutting off your nose to spite your face on both sides.
Yeah, and there was all this smoke about how, you know, schools from the state of Texas were considering joining either of these two. And like, you know, I just look at this and I say, look, man, like, no matter what you want to look at in expansion, you know, no matter what you want to do on an individual basis, the reality is it's a strength in numbers proposition.
Exactly right.
And I just think that, you know, if you're going to a TV executive and trying to sell them on one market or two markets in Northern California or Southern Oregon or, you know, wherever you want to point to, you know, I just think that, and it's not that I think, I know that that's not as valuable as saying, all right, you know, we've got not only the mountain region, right, the mountain time zone, but we've also got the Pacific time zone.
Yeah.
And we are slowly but surely bleeding into the central time zone if you were to expand into Texas. That to me makes the most sense. But once again, we are here talking about how a merger doesn't seem to be an option because both sides are not in alignment on that proposition.
But do we really believe, and let's say it's Texas State, do we really believe that Texas State brings the central time zone or the state of Texas to the Pac-12? I mean, physically, does it? Sure it does. But is there real value in San Marcos, Texas? There's not. You're not a brand. You're not somebody it's very important that they add another member. I think we all, for obvious
completely
reasons,
agree. Part of the process.
Is San Marcos, Texas, the market that you were pining for? It clearly is not. And I think that,
I mean, what choice do you have, though?
You don't. It is really unfortunate that Sacramento State is on the timeline they're on because it makes them ineligible. That would be the most logical move for everybody. But if you're the Pac-12, that doesn't solve your problem. Texas State, I mean, you're talking about, do you guys know where San Marcos, Texas is? And I'm not, if you do, I'm not trying to be an idiot about it. Or San Marcos, Texas, quite literally is between San Antonio and Austin, off the western flank of Houston. Like it is quite literally in the middle of nowhere. And I don't think it helps you that much at all. If you're sitting in a boardroom at Fox, or if you're on a call and you're negotiating a deal at Fox, hey, we got Texas State. I don't think that helps you that much. That's where I say you need to merge. And I am somebody that advocates that maybe not everybody involved in this puzzle currently would survive a merger.
Mm-hmm.
That's the tough, harsh reality of college sports today, that maybe they don't all survive. But if you're the Pac-12, I find it hard to believe in this moment in time that you're going to get Memphis or Tulane or I mean, USF and Memphis would be a home run, in my opinion.
Totally agree.
But now you're not a regional conference. The travel is cost prohibitive, and the human toll of the travel is prohibitive. I think that's very clear. So I say I understand it. I understand Texas State. It's just not a difference maker.
Yeah, and I think that this concept of, which of these conferences is going to be regarded as better. I see a lot of people doing this thing where they want to say, oh, well, the Pac-12 is the fifth best conference, or the Mountain West is the sixth best. I don't think, to be honest with you, that whether we're talking about Power Four commissioners or we're talking about TV executives, I don't think they care. Because again, and we're going to get to this in a little while, but this conversation around, the CFP and, auto bids versus seating and basically access for, the Pac-12 and the Mountain West, essentially, you're getting to a point where nobody cares if you're the fifth or the sixth. They only care if Fresno State can win a ball game, which we know they can't against that level of competition.
Yeah.
So unless Boise State, let's say, is going to resurrect another Ashton Ginty or come up with another just incredible team out of the blue, I just don't understand what school out of either of these conferences is going to be the one that breaks through and is consistently in the college football playoff. Because ultimately, that's where this road leads. That's where the whole, hey, they're the best conference, they're the best G5. Okay, neat, great. Here's your gold star.
Yeah.
But it doesn't matter if you can't win the games. It doesn't matter.
And this is my point about Boise State. And this is, again, why I'm going to say you should merge. If you merge, you're in the college football playoff every single year. Everybody's making more money. And if you merge, you have a chance to put how many more teams as a single entity conference into the NCAA tournament. But I think the egos on the Pac-12 side simply will not allow that to happen. Because as we have exclusively reported, and now everybody's run with, Gloria Nevarez has broached merging multiple times. And it has been a hard no from the three remaining entities in the Pac-12, Teresa Gould, Oregon State, and Washington State. And as we reported exclusively 2 weeks ago, and now multiple people have run with, including Pete Thamel at ESPN, the exiting members of the Mountain West were all open to the conversation. They were certainly not a hard no. But yet here we are in a place where you're going to have these two entities that I think are going to leech from each other.
Yes.
And sadly, it just didn't have to happen, which is the same thing I always say about the old Pac-12. It should have never gotten to this point. You should still be one of the best athletic conferences in the country, but you're not. So now you have to do what you have to do, and that's why something like Texas State makes sense. The fact that the Pac-12 has come to a point where Texas State is a really important athletic property tells you all you need to know. Because I have talked to an executive at every TV company that is involved in college football, and not one of them outside of Memphis, not one school that is being talked about within expansion for the Pac-12 moves their needle. Not one. Not even Sacramento State. But I can tell you, TV people all the time tell me, hey, if Memphis is involved, hey, if it were Memphis, I got a guy tell me Friday, hey, if it were Memphis, this would be an unbelievable win for the Pac-12. And I agree with that.
Yeah.
Memphis would be a home run. That is that is a brand. That is a basketball brand. That is a football brand, which Texas State is neither. And I get it. I hear from Texas State fans all the time, oh, Monty, you just don't know it.
Yeah.
Bro, I know. You guys are warped into this idea of, well, look at what we've done on the field. It doesn't matter what you've done on the field because nobody has seen what Texas State has done on the field. They will have to go and read about it. And I don't have to read about what Penny's doing at Memphis for basketball.
Right.
I don't have to read what for Gonzaga. I don't have to go back and check stats on if Gonzaga is a good basketball program. I don't have to do that.
It's known.
I can tell you that TV executives have no idea what Texas State brings to the athletic table. It it just doesn't move the needle. And it's unfortunate because the Pac-12 fans deserved way better than this. Mountain West fans deserved way better than this. Fans on both sides of that line, I cannot tell you how passionate Mountain West and Pac-12 fans are. We hear from them
all the time.
We get mail, email. Like when the Pac-12 was melting down, I cannot tell you how many people came to our studio every day to talk about the Pac-12 melting down.
Yeah.
Like, I cannot tell you, when that was all happening, we had crowds of people standing outside our door watching our show.
Yeah.
On the days when the Pac-12, when the four corner schools and what's Colorado doing. And
yeah, I mean, one of those days was like 20, 30 people just standing there,
standing there watching our show.
Yeah.
We're in an office building and like people are just hanging around. That's how passionate Pac-12 fans are.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's what makes that such a tragedy, because Pac-12 fans deserve better than this.
And to be clear, my opinion is I still don't have massive confidence that this conference is around in 5 years. I mean, I think that there's such a long road to getting to a place where you are what I would call established. You're to a point where you're like, all right, yeah, we're good. But like, even if we have a bad year, we're still good. We've got enough. We've got our donors. We've got private equity as an example. We've got, we've got this or that. We've got our means to be, stabilized, if you will. And I don't know. I am sure that they have a plan. I'm sure that they know the numbers, that they've been through the numbers and the calculations, that they, have a plan that they think is going to work. But I guarantee you that plan is contingent on getting a certain discount in mediation. And that,
I would agree
to
with
me,
that.
Is the biggest question mark in front of your face if you're a Pac-12 fan right now. What of mediation? Because, to what you were saying earlier, everything we're being told is going great. But
progress is being made.
Progress is being made. Okay, great. Awesome. But to what end? And that's what I'm fascinated about with this next step. Because everyone's asking, okay, well, what's next? What's next for the Pac-12? We're all thirsty for the next thing. Well, the next thing is figuring out what exactly the Pac-12 is not having to pay for after this process is done. And at that time, then we'll have a much clearer picture of the path forward.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, I think it's very much the exact same thing for the Mountain West. How much, because you owe unequal shares to UNLV.
Right.
That's, everybody's talked about that. The people at UNLV, I can tell you, sources close to that situation told me straight away they are not concerned about the money. They are, I think, far more concerned about stability and access, and I think they know they have that. I think it's going to be very interesting to see, if you're the Pac-12, your priorities have to be getting that 8th member, getting a TV deal, and chasing St. Mary's.
Yes.
In that order, right? And I think because you need stability right now. And by all accounts, the Mountain West should have a media rights deal, I would think, by kickoff of football season. We'll see. But just people in television telling me their relationships are very strong. The Pac-12 is having to create new relationships. And I think what you're seeing is, what are they willing to accept? What are they willing to offer the Pac-12 in concession for, like, this current deal they announced for this coming year? Their net is significantly lower. Why do you think we have not seen the hoopla and the fanfare of, hey, look at our great TV deal, here's how much money we're making?
Right.
Why is the Pac-12 not put out, oh man, we're making boatloads of money on this deal for 2025? Because they're not. Their net is the issue for this coming football season, because they're going to have to pay production costs pretty much for every one of their games. So that's a huge deal. Are you willing to do that in your next deal, in the longer term 26 and beyond deal? I would hope not. Because if that deal, and again, I go back to what Teresa Gould told Front Office Sports, hey, We need a transformative partnership. And this next deal, she literally says in the interview there, she literally says, hey, we need a transformational partnership. We don't just need a paycheck.
The one thing I keep saying to potential partners is, given where we are as a league, I don't want these partnerships to be transactional partnerships. I don't want this to be a media rights partner writing us a check and televising a bunch of games. We need these partnerships to be transformational at this point, and for somebody to really jump in with us and say, we want to help elevate and reimagine the new Pac-12.
So what did you do? You went and got somebody to hand you a check and put your games on their network. That's the issue. So going forward into 2026, I would certainly think you would have to do that deal differently. But this goes back to, and Pac-12 fans, I'm sure you are going to absolutely feast on this today, but this goes back to, how much value do you really have? Because you are never, if we learned anything from George Kliavkoff's back of the envelope calculation bullshit, and $50 million, you're not worth what you say you're worth. The reality in life, and I don't care if you're a UPS driver, a police officer, a school teacher, whatever, you're worth what somebody's willing to pay you.
Back of the envelope calculations.
And I think our sources have been nails across the board. They're worth, I think, on the high side, $8 million per school per year. On the high side. And I think it's going to be less than that. But is if you get, and let's say you get $8 million on average, right? Because you're going to have unequal revenue distribution.
Of course.
But you're paying Gonzaga full freight. You're not paying them a prorated amount because they're only basketball. They're getting a full share. So
Gonzaga,
how much are you actually getting? And how much do you owe Boise State? And my bigger question is, are you kind of, I don't know what's the right word. Are you splitting the baby here, if you will, between the Mountain West and the Pac-12? Because I think you are.
Well,
I'll go back
and
say again, I think they're both going to wind up on ESPN's streaming platform because ESPN needs the content. I think they both probably in one form or another, because don't forget Fox is launching essentially a mirror platform to what ESPN is. Do you guys know what I'm talking? ESPN DTC, direct to consumer. The ESPN platform will launch this fall. And then they need a significant amount of content to fill. So that's why you have a Pac-12 game on ESPN. That's why you have a Pac-12 game on CBS, because they need content.
Yeah.
But they don't need content on traditional television. They need it in their streaming app. So now is this new incarnation of the Pac-12 willing to be 60% of its games streamed? And does that get you $8 million per year per school? These are the questions that have to be asked.
Well, and I think to that point, when you talk about expansion and like the makeup of the conference, again, this brings us right back to the point of what was promised. Because clearly, if you're Boise State, something was promised that drew your attention to get you to act quickly, verbally at least. And then obviously they waited for the deadline. But when I think about, when I hear you say, hey, well, unequal revenue sharing inside the conference, of course, otherwise known as performance-based revenue sharing in the Big 12 and the Power 4 conferences. So if you're Texas State as an example, if you're these schools that, maybe, understand that you're not going to go out and beat the best in your conference and compete for conference championships and thus try to compete for one college football playoff spot every 5 years. Like, that's my question. How do you finance this league in a way where you appease the big boys of the league, your Boise States, your San Diego States, obviously Gonzaga, like you said, while also making it equitable enough for the little guy to make enough where it makes sense for them? Because that's precisely why Memphis is not in your conference, because it wasn't going to make them enough money to justify the cost and everything like that. Dr. Scott told us that on this show. Like, No doubt about it. So that's what I'm saying. Like, I'm all down with expansion and all these cool wins that all the Pac-12 homers want to tell you this conference is racking up. But the reality is, I want to see, I want to see the checks start to come in for the promises that you inevitably made, a year ago to these schools. Because until that happens, I'm just not buying that this is just, a done deal and everything's good. This is different than, everyone wants to say, oh, well, OU and Texas went to the SEC and that was fine. Why not Texas State? That's a completely different situation, dude. Like, come on.
And I think that the interesting point there is, what promises financially did you make? Because both of these conferences have made financial agreements. And I know that, again, Pac-12 fan loses their mind when I say this. The Mountain West is getting paid. You don't go to mediation if you're the Pac-12 if you're not willing to cut a check to settle.
Yeah.
You're going to pay poaching fees and you're going to pay exit fees. How much is that going to be? And my opinion is, it almost doesn't matter, because if there's a check cut, you and I both know it will satisfy the financial debt, if you will, debt, call it what you want, the financial obligations of the Mountain West in the near term, or they're not going to do that deal.
Right.
And my opinion is, if it's $15 million per school, you're looking at, what is that, 5 schools? You're looking at $75 million. Let's say that's $60 million on just the exit fees, right? Like, you're going to get a significant financial windfall here. The Mountain West in the near term will be fine. And if they are able to secure a TV deal, and I would think if they're able to secure a TV deal by kickoff of this coming football season, the Mountain West is secure. They're fine.
And I also might add, what's the big difference between the two promises? Because I agree, both of these conferences have made obligations verbally and on paper. But isn't that just the biggest difference, right? I mean, the crux of this conversation is what's on paper and what's not on paper. The Pac-12 stuff is not on paper in terms of what they promised Boise State, and the other schools that are joining the conference. Unless that's just a secret, agreement that nobody knows about between the schools and the conference. As far as I'm concerned, you don't have an official, hey, signed, sealed, delivered contract on what we're doing in this conference in terms of revenue sharing and all that good stuff. Now, obviously, what's on paper is what, Washington State and Oregon State and the Pac-12 agreed to with the scheduling merger with the Mountain West. So again, my main point is, okay, let's say it is $60 million. Let's say you say $15 million. Okay, great. Cool. It's $15 million less dollars that you had to pay. But in the grand scheme of things, what's the number you really need to get to? Because you can't tell me, again, with all due respect, I don't think $15 million is really saving anyone nowadays in terms of conferences and, what you're trying to do. You start adding these numbers up and all of a sudden it's like, hey, the Mountain West is going to get a windfall here, but how much of that's got to go to UNLV?
Right.
We burn through money, I swear, in life and in these conversations like there's no tomorrow.
Well, the hell, the lawyers' fees alone.
The lawyers' fees alone, right?
Yeah.
Who winds up paying the lawyers' fees?
Yeah. I don't know. I think it's interesting because at the end of the day, only one of these conferences is going to put somebody into the college football playoff.
Is there such a thing as winning this thing?
There's not.
This whole thing.
No, we talked about this last week, and my opinion is unchanged. I don't believe that either one of these conferences can win. If you're the Mountain West, you're losing some really significant brands. Although I don't know that I would say you're losing a significant TV market. Because I think when you pick up GCU, who doesn't play football, that's really huge because that's bringing you Phoenix and Arizona.
Mm-hmm.
And I would remind you, that basketball fan base, and I am certain that Pac-12 fans will poo-poo it, but hey, you do you. Having been there, having covered that team, having been on the flagship station of that team, GCU fans are incredible. That building is full. It's amazing.
Yeah.
That's a really good ad. Okay, it's offset by Gonzaga. Totally get that. The prize TV market in the poaching efforts, if you will, was Las Vegas. Look at the SEC and the Big 12. What did all of them say? We want to be in Las Vegas. We want to be doing business in Las Vegas. It's the entertainment and sports capital of the world. It was a massive, massive win and a massive, massive loss for the Pac-12 not to get UNLV. And I think it is the only reason that the Mountain West was able to survive, in my opinion, is because UNLV stayed in that conference. Because UNLV couldn't afford to take a financial risk. And I still to this day maintain UNLV enjoys a good relationship with the Mountain West Conference. And I think that's why they stayed.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be very tough. I mean, one of these conferences, I would think, and it depends on how well the American does, because I think there's not a whole lot of opportunities for G5 college football playoff spots outside of those conferences.
No, there's not.
It's,
And on it's funny you bring that up because on the we don't have a picture of it, but the SEC at their spring meetings last week shared a document ranking the conferences based on playoff participation, and the American was the lowest one.
Yeah.
So, kind of speaks for itself.
It is, but it isn't that exactly why
And
Memphis
the
was
Pac-12
having
right above that too. So,
but isn't that why Memphis was having the conversation?
yeah, yes.
I mean, I think when you look at the money, that's involved in the college football playoff, it is not insignificant, friends. It is not insignificant. It is $4 million for all and this is 2024-25. $4 million for all 12 teams, and then $4 million for the 8 teams that advance, and $6 million for each of the 4 teams that make the semis, $6 million for the 2 that make the national championship game, and each team gets $3 million to cover expenses for each round. That is a lot of money. And if you're, I guess this goes back to the Boise conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you got your $4 million and $3 million for expenses. So you got $7 million. How much of that money do you get to keep? How much of that money in the Pac-12 will you get to keep?
Yeah, we'll see, bro.
What are the promises? Is it merit-based and you're keeping 100% of that for yourself? How many in the Pac-12 are going to be thrilled with that? Think Texas State's going to be okay with that? Right? That's my point. I think there's a lot of dealings to be done, and I'd like to see a grant of rights. I'd like to see, because I will remind you again, the Mountain West has a grant of rights done with all of their new membership, including UNLV. The reimagined Mountain West is on paper committing their rights to the conference, who can then go and sell those rights. So when we talk about being steps ahead of the Pac-12, the Mountain West is steps ahead of the Pac-12.
Yeah.
And now they're actually able to commiserate in privacy and start planning their futures. So, all right, enough of us, more of you. If you are here, please hit the like button. If you are watching on X, thank you for watching the show. Our growth on X has been fantastic. I really appreciate everybody. If you are listening on any of our audio platforms to our audio podcast, thank you for doing that. You can find us anywhere you get an audio podcast. Just search The Monty Show. Come on over to YouTube. In fact, why don't you just go to Google, search The Monty Show, Monty, The Monty Show, and come on over. Give us a thumbs up. Please hit the like button. It really helps the channel grow. And I can already see people are, Conundrum, how did you get filtered already? I haven't even read a comment yet. I have literally not read a comment.
Bro,
And Conundrum
Monday.
is filtered. Seriously,
Bro,
we're 43 minutes into the week and you got filtered already?
Yes, you did. Yes, you did.
It's
Bro,
amazing
that might
to
be
me.
a new record. I mean, I think Ferris was sub 20, but that's pretty good, dude.